This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
Hello and welcome to Invisible Hate. I am Saadia Khan.
And I'm Asad.
And our today's story takes us to the Atlanta metropolitan region of Georgia in March of 2021. A man frantically scrambles into a small room of Young's Asian massage parlor, quickly locking the door behind him. Overcome by terror, he huddles in the room, fearing for his life. The man and his wife had come to the massage parlor that day to enjoy a quiet night out away from the kids. Unfortunately, their night had not been quite as quiet as they had hoped. Gunshots ring out across the parlor, screams echo through the room, and then silence. On the other side of the door, the man's wife lays across the parlor floor, fatally shot. But she isn't the only one. 4 others lay nearby, shot down. A young man exits the establishment, gun in hand. He gets in his car and drives away, leaving tragedy and destruction in his wake, headed to his next location. This is Invisible Hate. Welcome back to Invisible Hate, a weekly true crime podcast in which Asad and I attempt to uncover the ugly truth behind various hate crimes, both recent and historical.
That's right, Saadia. Many of the cases that we discuss involve crimes committed against minority groups, and our goal, as always, is to determine through a discussion of the nuances and complexities of these situations whether or not they should be considered hate crimes. Before we begin, Saadia, how has your week been going? What's happening?
Oh, Asad, my week's been fine. It's been good. But you know what? On the weekend, on Saturday, in fact, I was on Columbia University's campus.
Oh, where all the stuff was happening?
Yeah, my alma mater. I was there to stand in solidarity with young activists. And I kid you not, the energy there is electric.
Yeah.
Most protesters there, young activists, they are completely non-violent. There was music, there were chants, there were placards, there were posters, and I felt incredibly proud of all of them.
So just for our listeners, this would have been the 3rd weekend of April because we record these a couple weeks in advance. And so
yes,
that's great to hear, Saadia. Were you actually on campus or off campus?
So I was on campus. Again, I went to Columbia, so it was easier for me to get in.
Yeah.
So I walked inside the campus and I saw again, the encampment place and then the chants and students. It was just so surreal, Asad.
Yeah.
Look, I will say this. Some people may be uncomfortable around that stuff. I feel like activism is uncomfortable. It really challenges your beliefs and your ideology around certain things. But it's brilliant. And these young activists are doing the job that all of us should be doing, fighting for justice and equality at the end of the day, right? Fighting for end to a war. And that is such a selfless act, in my opinion. But what do you think, Asad?
Oh, I'm all for protests in general. I think that the ones on Columbia, the ones that we're talking about, I'm all for peaceful, nonviolent protests. I think I actually even have a soft spot for things that are violent as long as it's not towards individuals, though that we can discuss another day. But yeah, I think protesting is a right that I welcome people to exercise. And I don't have to agree with, in this case, I do agree with what they're protesting, but, in general, I would like to see this happen more in our society, because I think it's a great way to raise issues of importance to the wider community. And, the protests that shut down the bridges, like in San Francisco, like all for that as well. And I fully recognize that if I was driving to get to work that day,
you would be annoyed, right?
I would be so annoyed, and I would, I would hate those protesters. But, people feel like this is the only thing and the best thing that they can do. And I'm all for that in a democratic society for sure.
Definitely, Asad. Brilliantly said. So should we jump into our today's conversation?
Yeah, let's do it. I want to hear more.
It's the afternoon of March 16th, 2021. Several customers sit inside Young's Asian Massage in Acworth, Georgia, a northwest suburb of Atlanta in Cherokee County. Sandwiched between a beauty salon and boutique, the establishment sits tucked away in a small strip mall. The parlor fills with quiet chatter as customers enjoy their relaxing massage treatments in their respective rooms. This peaceful vibe does not last long, however. Shortly after 5 p.m., a young white man by the name of Robert Aaron Long enters Young's Asian Massage. In his hand, he carries a 9mm gun purchased just hours before. You know what, Asad? It's surprising to me he purchased it just hours before. Like, does he know how to use it? I mean, I always think when people purchase something right before going on these killing sprees, like, they probably know how to shoot the gun, right?
I've never shot a gun, but I've shot enough play guns or water guns or whatever that I'm just assuming that it's like, all you got to do is pull the trigger.
Apparently, it's a complicated process.
I'm sure there are YouTube videos that you could watch to educate yourself, unfortunately, on this stuff. But yeah, totally.
Yeah, you're right. Anyways, going back to the case, before anyone can react, Long raises the gun and begins to shoot. Gunshots ring out across the parlor as bullets tear through the air. Individuals fall to the floor, the bullets meeting their intended targets. Screams echo throughout the parlor as terrified customers and workers alike attempt to take cover. One man scrambles into a nearby room, locking the door safely behind him. The others are not so lucky. Minutes later, the gunman exits Young's Asian Massage, still clutching his gun. In his wake, he leaves 2 Asian women, 1 white woman, and 1 white man sprawled across the parlor floor.
Awful.
So this is indiscriminate shooting for now, Asad.
Yeah, just walks in and
starts killing, right?
Can't even imagine. You're right, yeah.
2 of the victims are taken to the hospital, where they later pass away, unable to overcome their horrendous injuries. As for the other 2, their stories come to a tragic end right there in the parlor, fatally shot. Outside the establishment, a 5th individual lies shot on the sidewalk. 30-year-old LCS Hernandez Ortiz had been walking past the parlor on his way to a money exchange business next door when he encountered the gunman. Long had raised the 9mm gun and shot him in the face.
Oh my goodness.
Moments later, the man frantically reaches for his phone. "I've been shot," he tells his wife. "Please come." That night, he undergoes emergency surgery at a nearby hospital where his wife rushes to see him. Despite injuries to his forehead, throat, lung, and stomach, Hernandez Ortiz will thankfully recover, his brain luckily untouched by the bullet. Can you believe it, Asad?
Saadia, that is, shocking. I'm always amazed when someone who has, taken a shot to their head has survived, and especially with no brain damage. Oh, unbelievable. I'm grateful to hear that he recovered. So what happens next, Saadia? I'm assuming this is not the end of Long's shooting spree, right?
Unfortunately, it isn't, Asad. His shooting spree continues. After exiting Young's Asian Massage, Long gets back in his car and drives about 30 miles from Cherokee County to Piedmont Road in Atlanta. There he enters Gold Spa, where he raises his 9mm gun once more and begins to shoot. A woman hiding at the back of the spa calls 911 to report a white man with a gun. Please just come, she implores after the operator asks her a series of questions.
Yeah, I can only imagine like when you're calling 911 to report something that's happening immediately, and then they ask you a bunch of questions. You just want to be like, no, just come. And I think people don't realize that these operators are so sophisticated that they are already sending people out, but trying to get additional questions to see if they need to send more people or EMTs or fire department or that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
That's good information, Asad. I didn't know that, by the way.
Yeah.
Officers soon arrive at the scene of the crime to find 3 Asian women fatally shot. The gunman nowhere to be found. While there, they receive a report of gunshots fired across the street at Aromatherapy Spa. They enter the spa to find the body of yet another Asian woman.
Oh my goodness.
The gunman is once again nowhere to be found, having fled the scene of the crime. And with that, Long's rampage finally comes to an end. He leaves tragedy and destruction in his wake, having injured 1 and stolen the lives of 8 others, 6 of whom were of Asian descent. An official from the South Korean consulate in Atlanta later confirms that 4 of the 8 killed were of Korean ethnicity.
Just awful, Saadia, that he could leave such a destructive path over the course of just a couple hours, right? Like maybe even less. We talk about this all the time, how quickly these things can happen, and it's just so sad. And clearly it seems like he was targeting some people, but I'm interested to know more and hear more about the public's response and then also about the victims. But Saadia, let's do that after a quick break. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
Welcome back to Invisible Hate. So, Saadia, how did the public respond to these horrible attacks?
Asad, we've seen this with so many cases, right? Members of the Asian community were understandably both outraged and terrified by these shootings, as would anybody be, right?
Of course.
The attacks gained immediate national attention. In a public statement responding to the attacks, here's what Vice President Harris had to say.
Our country, the president and I and all of us, we grieve for the loss. Our prayers are extended to the families of those who have been killed. And it speaks to a larger issue, which is the issue of violence in our country and what we must do to never tolerate it and to always speak out against it.
According to the New York Times, New Jersey Democratic Representative Andy Kim, who, by the way, is of Korean ancestry, posted on Twitter, and I quote, "We should never be outraged by violence only targeting those who look like us. Hate comes in many forms," unquote. This is such an important point, Asad. A lot of times when we see violence being targeted at people who look like us, we have this visceral reaction to be defensive and to be outraged by it. But other times when we think it's not targeted at us or people like us, we tend to be less impacted.
Yeah, less sympathetic. And yeah, I think part of it is there just is so many horrible things that happen. And sometimes, yeah, it takes something of a personal connection in some way, shape, or form to really like get your blood boiling, right? And whether that's your ethnicity or your race or your location in the country or your gender or whatever. But I think, yeah, he's right. Like never be outraged by violence that only, targets the people that look like us is a great way to think about things.
Exactly. Now, Atlanta-born Democratic Georgia Senator Raphael Warnock told Capitol reporters, and I quote, "This kind of violence happens too often in America.
Mm-hmm.
And we weep with those who weep, but we've got to do everything we can in terms of addressing bigotry and hate in our country," unquote. Asad, I feel like we've heard this so many times, and yet it persists.
I think that's exactly right. And I think there's two things. One, we as a country have just become normalized to these type of things happening every month or every couple months or whatever, and then we just move on to the next thing. The second thing is the people that want change don't have the power to make the change, right? And I think the majority of people in the country want tighter gun control or, laws that can address this kind of stuff. It just doesn't happen because they don't have the power right now, unfortunately, to make the legislation happen.
You're absolutely right, Asad. Now, many other organizations responded to the attacks as well, most notably the recently formed organization Stop AAPI Hate, which, by the way, was formed in March of 2020 to help prevent anti-Asian discrimination during the pandemic. The attacks only seem to inspire further resistance against such instances of hate, and there was a lot of collective action, communities coming together to not just condemn this act of violence, but also form coalitions to fight against it. According to NPR, in March of 2022, in honor of the one-year anniversary of these tragic attacks, activists and community members organized a Break the Silence rally against anti-Asian racism and violence, scheduled to take place at the Georgia Capitol just a few days before the March 16th anniversary. Several other cities followed suit, holding similar rallies.
It's so interesting because I think I'm just kind of proving the point from earlier. I vaguely remember this happening, right? And I vaguely remember there being a big outcry about it, but it didn't register in my head the details I've completely forgotten about this incident and the response to it and whatever legislation or whatever changes might have come out of it. And, that's really sad. This should be, the fact that however many, it was eight people that died and so many more injured, multiple shootings, like this should be one of the biggest events in the history of a country, but it's just like another day at the office, it's so sad.
Absolutely, Asad. It is sad. And that's why we have Invisible Hate to remind listeners of all the hate crimes that are still happening in the US, right?
Totally. So, I think in that vein, Saadia, do you think you could tell us a little bit more about the victims of this crime?
Of course, Asad. The 4 victims killed at Young's Asian Massage included 33-year-old Delana Ashley Nguyen, 54-year-old Paul Andre Michaels, 49-year-old Xiao J. Tan, and 44-year-old Dao Yu Feng. According to The Guardian, Delana was a mother to a 14-year-old son and an 8-month-old daughter.
Oh, so sad.
She worked at a Waffle House as both a server and an occasional grill operator. She and her husband had been enjoying a night out away from the kids, something that we mentioned in the beginning, when the gunman had entered the spa and shot her. According to another article by The Guardian, Paul Andre Michaels was a handyman who had been completing handiwork for this spa. Oh my gosh, Asad, this is so tragic. One of 9 children, he had grown up in Detroit, Michigan. From serving in the army to owning a home security and theater business to becoming a handyman, he had tried so many different things, Asad. And he had just completed building his final shelf for Young's on the very day that he was shot. Xiaoji Tan was the owner of Young's Asian Massage, the daughter of a Catholic bicycle mechanic. She had grown up in China, the youngest of 2 daughters. Described by her daughter, and I quote, Living the American dream, she had come to the US from China, created a family, and opened 2 businesses. According to The Guardian, her daughter described her mom as her best friend. They had planned to celebrate her 50th birthday together over a slice of strawberry cake, but that never happened because she did not make it to 50. Unfortunately, Asad, little is known about the 4th victim, Dao Yofeng. As for those killed in Long's second attack, 74-year-old Soon Chung Park, 51-year-old Hyun Young Grant, and 69-year-old Soncha Kim were victims of Gold Spa attack, while 63-year-old Yong Woo-yu was the only victim of the aromatherapy spa shooting. According to a CNN interview with Yong Woo-yu's son, Robert Peterson, Yu was a traditional Korean woman who taught her biracial sons to, and I quote, fully embrace their Asian heritage and do good work. Peterson fondly remembers playing poker with her. Unfortunately, little is known about Soon Chung Park and Soncha Kim. Hoon Young Grant's loss was particularly tragic, Asad, because she was a single mother who had dedicated her life, her whole life, to raising and providing for her 2 sons. In an interview with the Today Show, one of her sons, Randy, describes her.
I could talk to her about almost anything. She was in her 50s when you look at her, believe it or not, but she was very much just like early 20s teenager at heart.
Tragically, Yu's 2 kids were left entirely alone after their mother's death, forced to fend for themselves.
Yeah, it's so sad. It really is.
The rest of the family remained in South Korea, unable to come to the United States. Randy was forced to create a GoFundMe in hopes of finding a way to financially support himself and his younger brother. The good news is this page was incredibly successful and boys were able to raise nearly $3 million, which is absolutely amazing to hear, right?
I'm looking at it right now. Over 75,000 people donated. The original goal was $20,000 and they got close to $3 million. So that's amazing. The best of America, best of the world right there, coming together to support people.
Exactly.
Saadia, let's take another quick break right now. And when we come back, I want to hear about the perpetrator and then the investigation that followed after the shootings. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Invisible Hate. So, Saadia, can you tell us more about the man who committed these horrible, horrible crimes?
So, Asad, Robert Aaron Long was just 21 years old at the time of the shootings. Something that we have seen with other perpetrators, some of them are really young, which is so disturbing, right?
Yeah, right.
According to the New York Times, he grew up in a small woodsy neighborhood of Creek Hollow, Georgia, with his parents and sister. Long and his father liked to hunt deer. As a boy, he would practice with his crossbow in the backyard. He graduated from Sequoia High School in Canton, Georgia. Long and his family were members of First Baptist Church in Milton, Georgia. Long was also a dedicated member of the church's student ministry team, attending weekly meetings and partaking in summer volunteer camps in Pittsburgh and New Orleans. I'm always curious about what goes on in these meetings, especially church camps and church gatherings. I've never been to one, but I wonder what kind of conversations happen there.
I think it's just, regular activities that kids do whenever they get together, infused with a little bit of, religion or spirituality. So I'm assuming, I've never been on these type of things, but that would be my assumption. It's just it's just a regular trip.
Absolutely, Asad. And the church's youth and missions pastor, by the way, said, and I quote about Long, he was one of those core young men involved in everything we did. The other kids looked up to him, especially the young ones. Unquote. This is surprising to me, Asad. Now, this is, a great, promising young kid who's involved in church, who goes hunting with his dad, has a very normal family, and then something so horrific happens, right? It's just so tragic and so confusing. Sometimes it really scares me how human mind operates. Honestly, it's so messed up.
For sure.
In his Instagram account bio, Long described his primary interests as, and I quote, pizza, guns, drums, music, family, and God. This pretty much sums up my life, unquote.
Sounds about like it's half of America.
You're right. You're right. Anyways, Long appears to have struggled with some unhappiness. In 2019, the young man had gone to visit his girlfriend in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and failed to return home. He sent his parents a text message claiming that he did not intend to return, wanting a fresh start. His parents reported him missing. However, the police soon informed them that he did not meet the criteria for a missing person. It is assumed that he must have returned home at some point. Unfortunately, the young man seems to have also struggled with sex addiction. Before committing his horrendous crimes, Long had taken part in a program called Hope Quest, aimed at treating sex and pornography addiction.
Yeah, he sounds like a really, complicated guy, with a regular guy in some ways and dealing with some other kind of serious issues as well. And so, Saadia, this is before kind of like what happens in the events of leading up to that day. And then he goes on to commit these 3 crimes. We actually didn't talk about whether or not police found him afterwards. What happened? Yeah.
Yes, Asad. After the shootings, police found Long. Immediately following the shootings, police put out a call on social media, releasing a surveillance image of the suspect standing near a Hyundai Tucson outside one of the massage parlors. They soon received a call from Long's parents claiming that they recognized their son in a surveillance image.
Whoa, can you imagine that you're the parent and you call police being like, yeah, that's my son? Wow, wild.
As I'm reading this, God forbid, if you and I were in this situation ever, would you call?
Yeah, I think I would. Yeah, for sure. I mean, whether or not I believe that child was capable of doing what might have been claimed, like, I think, I would do it just in hopes of them not being harmed by the police, right? Like, so yeah, I would. Well, how about you, Saadia? I mean, you're a little bit more of a rebel.
I mean, now that you've said you would, I would say the same thing, I said. But there is a moral dilemma there, right? I don't know, Asad. I mean, I would. Look, I would. That's the right thing to do.
I think for a lot of people it would come down to circumstances, whether or not you would trust the police. I think I would want to know more about what the circumstances are of the post. Like, I think if it's like this person is a suspect in this crime, or like, we're worried that they're going to be doing more of this stuff. Yeah, I think for me it's a no-brainer. Like, because you wouldn't want your child to cause additional harm to people.
Right. So that may be the motivation.
Whether or not you could trust police in terms of, what they're posting, I think that's a personal decision for everybody.
Absolutely, Asad. And with the help of Long's parents, police were able to track his phone in order to locate him. So that really helped, right?
Yeah.
According to the Homeland Security Digital Library, that very same night at around 8:30 p.m., police arrested the 21-year-old about 150 miles south of Atlanta, finding his 9mm gun in the car. Oh my gosh, Asad, we've talked about this so many times. Perpetrators end up leaving guns and all the other evidence in their cars.
Yeah,
it happens
true.
So many times.
Maybe he was on his way to do additional crimes, and that's why he still had the gun, or why he still had his phone. Like, do people not know that to locate them? Yeah, it seems like, criminals are not the smartest people, but yeah, totally.
He later told authorities that he'd been on his way to Florida. In an interview with investigators, Long admitted to the crimes, claiming that the shootings had been a result of his frustration with his sex addiction, an addiction that conflicted with his religious beliefs. So this is really confusing to me, Asad. But here's the thing. He claimed to have attacked the parlors as a means of eliminating his quote-unquote temptation, as he apparently viewed the parlors as a source of sexual temptation. And this feeds into different stereotypes, Asad, which we see play out on TV, in movies, and hence it's so important to debunk these stereotypes, because they can lead to really, really bad consequences like this one.
I think what I'm wondering is why he was specifically targeting Asian-owned parlors. What is it about the stereotypical connection in his mind that connected, whatever problems that he was having with his sex addiction with, it would be solved if he took out the violence on these specific parlors?
I said, worry not, we will get to it. But it is believed that he had attended these parlors in the past and sought to carry out these attacks as a form of vengeance. According to the New York Times, Long had purchased his gun legally just hours before the shooting from Big Woods Goods gun shop in Canton, Georgia. I sometimes feel like it's more difficult to purchase and find candy in the US than guns in some places, which is so sad.
Yep.
According to Fox 5, Long also allegedly told investigators that he'd been drunk at the time of the shooting and had intended to shoot himself after the attacks, but had been too scared, turning to alcohol to calm his fear. This is interesting, Asad. So I wonder if he drank so that he could shoot, or he shot and then drank so that he would not kill himself.
Interesting. Yeah, it might be both even as well, right?
According to the New York Times, Long had also been on his way to Florida to commit similar crimes at a business in connection with the porn industry when the police stopped him. So he's a very complicated kid. On the one hand, he is claiming that he was planning to take his own life, but then on the other hand, he also talks about how he was on his way to Florida to commit similar crimes and cause more harm. So I think he didn't even know what he wanted to do or what his next steps would be. So I'm really glad that his parents called the police.
So, Saadia, tell us about the trials after his arrest. What happened?
So Asad Long pleaded guilty to 23 charges in Cherokee County Court for the killing of the 4 victims shot in Young's Asian Massage. For this, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. According to Fox 5, the Cherokee County District Attorney claimed not to have found evidence of racial hatred or animosity, as there had been some racial diversity amongst the 4 victims, 2 of whom had been white and 2 of whom had been Asian.
Interesting.
So they are basically ruling out hate crime in a way. Fulton County District Attorney, however, felt differently. She felt that the crimes had been motivated by race and gender. She is therefore pursuing a sentencing enhancement under the state hate crimes law for Long's Fulton County charges. Now, this makes a lot of sense, Asad. He is talking about sex addiction. It seems, again, I'm making assumptions that he is probably a cisgender hetero male and therefore targeting women, especially Asian women. That's what I think the attorney is going with. Now, according to CNN, the hate crimes law was passed by the Georgia legislature in 2020 after the horrendous shooting of the 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery. The law allows prosecutors to classify existing charges as a hate crime before trial.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
The jury first must determine whether the defender is guilty, after which they must consider whether or not the crime can be considered a hate crime. So first you have to determine whether he's guilty or not, and then the determination of hate crime comes into play. The case is expected to be the first test of this new Georgia law and therefore pretty significant. In addition to the hate crime sentencing enhancement, she is seeking the death penalty. This is interesting, Asad. I'm mostly wary of death penalty, so I don't know. I have mixed feelings around that. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, I'm completely against the death penalty. And I think sometimes DAs who will add the death penalty charge on there as a way to negotiate for something lesser as a tactic. I don't know if that's the case here, but yeah.
That's an interesting point, Asad. I never thought of it that way. Long is faced with 4 counts of murder in association with the Atlanta shootings, as well as several other charges, including that of domestic terrorism, aggravated assault, and possession of a weapon during the commission of a felony.
If you're charged with terrorism, I feel like that's just like inherently a hate crime as well, even though I know it's not the same thing. But I just feel like if you're charged with terrorism, like you just hate everybody.
Yeah, you're right.
You know, I don't know. I was just thinking that out loud.
And for these charges, I said he has pleaded not guilty, obviously attempting to avoid the death penalty. And we want to clarify here that Long is being charged for the shootings in 2 separate cases based on where they occurred, right? So he has already been charged in Cherokee County and awaits trial in Fulton County, Atlanta. Just to clarify for our listeners.
So he's already been sentenced to life in jail in the Cherokee County shooting, and now we're just waiting for the trial to happen and the results of this Fulton County. Yeah.
In the meantime, Long's Georgia Public Defender Council defense attorneys have filed dozens of motions on his behalf, including an attempt to remove the possibility of the death penalty due to his age. They have even challenged the composition of the Fulton County grand jury that indicted Long and asked that the media be kept out of the courtroom. All motions have been unsuccessful, however. In the meantime, Long continues to serve his life sentence in jail for the Cherokee County shooting. Asad, with that, let's get to our primary question of the episode. Should the Atlanta area spa shootings be considered a hate crime?
Yeah, you know, Saadia, I think as you first shared details of the case, based on the types of people that he was targeting, I was immediately thinking yes. But as you kind of read through the details of the case, I kind of switched my opinion. You know, I think that if there was more evidence of anti-Asian bias in his life preceding the shootings, perhaps, but I just felt like there wasn't enough evidence for me that he was specifically targeting Asian-owned spas. But maybe I missed something. What do you think?
So Asad, let me challenge you there.
Oh, okay, let's do it.
Now, as you said, some have argued, like you, that this was not a hate crime, but rather a crime motivated mainly by his frustration with his sex addiction, right?
Yeah.
And his desire to eliminate temptation, whatever that means. However, there is an explanation that does not seem to capture the essence of what happened. So there is a long and troubling history of fetishization and sexualization, stereotyping directed towards Asian women.
Yeah.
According to PBS writer Viet Nguyen, and I quote, "Of course he targeted these women because they were Asian, and Asian women end up in massage parlors to which non-Asian men are attracted," unquote. So it's not just sex addiction, right? It is sex addiction connected to the stereotypical ideation in a way of Asian women and sexualization of those women, which in a way then can be seen as a hate crime against a specific ethnicity and gender as well. The point that I'm trying to make is, Asad, Long's sex addiction may have been tied to his fetishization of Asian women, potentially explaining why he went after these particular spas and individuals. Look, if it was just sex addiction, then he could have gone on a killing spree of any woman, right? Mm-hmm. But he targeted these spas specifically, meaning he was trying to target Asian women. 6 out of 8 victims killed in the shootings were Asian women. So there was some targeted hate towards Asian women specifically, whether it was in the context of sex addiction, gender, ethnicity, or a combination of all of it, Asad. We don't know that, right? But it seems to suggest that there is an element of Asian ethnicity blend into his thought process. That's how I see it.
I hear you, and I think I'm surprised that there isn't more evidence that was presented, or maybe it will be in the upcoming trial, that, how did he choose these locations? Were they random? If he had been to them before, like, there's got to be Google searches that he did on his computer, and, did he look up for spas near me or Asian spas near me, and I'm surprised that there isn't more evidence like that suggests that it was more of a targeted hate crime. Clearly, like, the end result of 6 of the 8 victims being Asian women is, horrific, and it says something. I guess I'm struggling with, as we see it now, this should be considered a hate crime. I guess I don't know. I think I need to sit with this one, and I wonder what our listeners think.
Yeah, we would love to hear from our listeners. I think it's a hate crime. Asad thinks it may not be a hate crime, or just, mere sex addiction crime. So tell us what you guys think. Email us at info@invisiblehatepodcast.com.
Yeah. So where is this guy now, Saadia?
Asad, online records suggest that he is currently being held at the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification Prison in Jackson, Georgia, where he continues to serve his life sentence. He still awaits his Fulton County court trial, in which he will be tried with hate crime charges and the death penalty. It is unsure when this trial will occur and what the results may be, but in the meantime, Long remains in the very prison that holds Georgia's state execution chamber, which is a bit scary.
Yeah.
As for the families of the victims, they continue to grieve the loss of their loved ones. In an interview with NBC News local Atlanta affiliate 11A Live, Delana Ashley's sister talks about her sister. Take a listen.
The fact that Robert Aaron Long is still here and she is not, and he's the reason that she's not, it bothers me. I will never forget what happened to her. But I'm trying to learn how to make it easier for me to go through life, not forgetting my sister, but remembering the best parts of my sister.
Asad, this is so tragic and horrendous, and honestly, it just breaks my heart to see how individuals, families, communities are changed forever when things like these happen, right? We can only hope that these families continue to heal from this tragic incident. Our thoughts, of course, are with all of them.
Yeah. Saadia, what can people do to help?
Listeners can help aid in the fight against these types of anti-AAPI actions by donating to and supporting organizations such as Stop AAPI Hate, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, and Asian Americans for Equality, amongst others. Moreover, listeners can help support the protection and empowerment of Asian American women and girls in particular by donating to the National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum. And Asad, did you know May is AAPI Heritage Month?
Oh, amazing. I didn't know that.
Yeah, now you know, Asad.
Yeah. Awesome. That's going to do it for this case. Thanks so much for listening to Invisible Hate. If you want to learn more, please check out the links in the show notes about this case. And then also, we'd love to hear your thoughts. So email us at info@invisiblehatepodcast.com. You can also find us online on Twitter and Instagram and all the places. Just search for Invisible Hate Podcast.
Thanks for listening, guys. If you like what you hear, please share with a friend. Invisible Hate is a joint production of Refilion Media and Immigrantly. We would like to thank our incredible team, which includes Michaela Strother, Emmanuel Monahan, Lindsay Gamu, and Paroma Chakravarti. Our music was done by Simon Hutchinson. We'll be back next week with another hate crime for us to analyze. Until next time, I am Saadia Khan.
And I'm Asad.